Don't take drugs, kids. It's not worth it. Flashback, formerly known as The Education of Fredrick Fitzell, stars Dylan O'Brien as Fred Fitzell, who just seems like a normal guy going through problems with his relationship and his job. However, Fred suddenly remembers something quite disturbing about his past, and slowly begins to unravel a long-hidden mystery about a missing girl, a drug called Mercury, and a terrifying creature that has followed him into adulthood. You know, I stumbled across this film completely by accident. Back sometime last year or something, I was like to myself, wait a minute, the last Dylan O'Brien film I watched was ages ago. So I searched up some of his upcoming movies and stumbled across this. Now, when I found out that I could watch it, I was pretty pumped because it seemed like a very ambiguous thriller with a certain drug in the center of it all. It gave me huge Synchronic vibes, and if you didn't already know what I thought about that film, I thought it was amazing. I fucking enjoyed it. I thought it was a masterpiece. This film, however, I refuse to believe that the people responsible for the making of this film wasn't on any sort of drug, because the best way to describe this film was that it was a huge ass drug trip. It's a film that wants to be so many different things and has a lot on its mind, but just turns into a confusing mess for the majority of us. Let's not discredit Dylan O'Brien here though. I thought his performance was great and very convincing. It's just that his character wasn't very interesting. Hell, none of the characters really were. First of all, we don't learn too much about them and their backstories, at least not enough to kind of like feel a very deep or any sort of emotional connection with. And the majority of them just felt like they were just there to be there. And this film feels very trapped, like very limited. Like not a whole lot of things happen, but when it does, it's just often very confusing. It's kind of like symbolism, is it not? Like there's a certain theme that the movie keeps exerting, like the feeling of being trapped in the past. Anyway, let's just unravel the basis of this movie so you guys understand. So essentially, it's just a guy who keeps reliving his past in a certain way that it just feels very real and has an effect on his future. So like someone with PTSD, past trauma, something like that. And like Synchronic, this movie messes with time and alternate realities, but it switches between past and present so much that it becomes really hard to follow at times. Like the movie keeps messing around with time with Fred Fitzell's memories so much that you don't know which reality is real anymore. At times you feel like it's going to lead to something. It's going to become something much bigger, but it just never does and fizzles out or just becomes a very confusing clusterfuck. This is one of those movies that should lead up to a conclusion, right? It should build up to a conclusion, and along with that build up, it's interesting, but you're just there for the ride and you're like learning about each like the pieces of the puzzles that lead up to the, you know, the conclusion and all that stuff. But you're just there like hoping that the conclusion makes some sort of logical sense and has a twist. Well, with this movie, I was just like, come on, hurry up and just show me what everything means, you know, I'm kind of done with it all. Towards the end, it did kind of make a little bit of sense, but it felt more so that they were like, okay, let's hurry up and conclude this. Doesn't matter if it makes sense or not. Let's just make it ambiguous and keep the audience guessing just to cover up the fact that we were on drugs this whole production and didn't know what we were doing. But like I said, towards the end, it did kind of make a little bit of sense. Now, the film has a lot of different ideas that sometimes clash with each other. But I think towards the end, like without spoiling too much of it, of course, it was like, the whole idea of it was like there are certain paths to life that you can take, and whichever one you take has a really big effect towards your future and what your future might look like. You know, like it's like the butterfly effect and all that. There's even a scene where Fred's teacher was like saying something like connecting the dots, you know, going from point A to point B to point C to point D. And after watching the movie, that part makes a lot more sense, and it's a lot more cooler now that I know that. And it's just that there's a lot of like different themes and kind of symbols, and this movie it feels like more than a movie and tries to give you a lot of hints about what's going on and what the like ultimate idea of the movie is. And that terrifying monster like that's been following him into adulthood, that part gets answered in a kind of confusing but sweet way. See, I just wish there was more of that. Ultimately, this is a very, very, very ambiguous movie that does give you hints to its meaning at times and is pretty interesting. But to a lot of people, I mean, it just might be a very confusing mess. I feel like this is a movie that might make a lot more sense and be a lot better the more you watch it and the more you understand it. But I don't even know if it is worth watching again. I'm going to give Flashback a C-. Guys, thanks so much for watching. Let me know what you think down below. Like and sub if you enjoyed, and as always, feel free to check out any of my previous videos. Until next time.